After Athens on this his second journey, Paul traveled to Corinth. Corinth was a cosmopolitan city, a crossroads of many peoples, thanks to its two ports, one on the Ionian Sea and the other on the Aegean Sea. The isthmus that would have prevented the circumnavigation of the Peloponnese would not be built until the late 1800s, while in Paul's time a paved road known as Diolko was available along which it was possible to tow ships of less than high tonnage dry. The unproductive stay spent in Athens was soon forgotten, thanks to the opportunities that Corinth offered. If Athens was a kind of university town jealous of its culture, Corinth was by contrast an open city that teemed with people of diverse backgrounds. Well-to-do and poor engaged in the most diverse trades. Nor is it proved by the fact that in Corinth Paul stayed for a year and a half from the winter of 50 to the summer of 52, supporting himself with the trade of tent-making, the guest of Aquila and Priscilla, a Christian couple who practiced the same trade. The apostolate carried out up to that time was bearing fruit. Various Christian communities had formed especially in the Roman provinces of Asia, Macedonia, and Achaia. Paul understood that it was time to organize, to keep firm, and advance the faith of these communities. He did this in two ways. He constituted itinerant apostles whom he trained to confirm the various communities in the faith, and he began writing circular letters to them, many of which we can still read today. These letters often arose from the need to correct some deviation or slackness that had been determined, but at the same time they were always an opportunity to encourage everyone in the faith and to explain with greater theological depth what had not yet become clear. However, they are always letters where a great paternal affection for these children of his shines through, begotten in faith. It is precisely from one of these letters, the first epistle to the Corinthians written later by Ephesius, that we are able to have an interesting insight into the life of these early Christian communities. We come to know the enthusiasm of their participation, but also the many uncertainties of a faith still in formation. The believers in Corinth were overwhelmingly of pagan origin, and we have seen in recounting Paul's speech at the Areopagus in Athens how the pagans had a taste for reasoning for its own sake. This was precisely what was happening in the Christian community in Corinth, which had split into as many subgroups as there were currents of thought that had formed and preferred to be baptized only by the one they thought was the best catechist, the one who seemed to be endowed with the most wisdom. Paul had to react firmly, showing the right way forward. He did so in his own passionate way, with strong antitheses, inviting them to have above all a supernatural vision inspired by the teachings of Christ, so that the inconsistency of their behavior would be made manifest. Paul shocks his interlocutors by confronting them with what encapsulates the essence of Christianity, the cross of Christ. And while the Jews ask for miracles and the Greeks seek wisdom, we preach Christ crucified, scandalous for the Jews, foolishness for the Gentiles. Why scandal? Why foolishness? For the Jews, the cross contradicts the very essence of God, who has always manifested himself with power, with prodigious signs. What a scandal, then, to believe in a God who allows himself to be crucified as a vulgar evildoer. For the Greeks, on the other hand, for their crystalline rationality, God is perfect being. He therefore had to be coupled with the concept of apatheia, the absence of passions. How could he have understood a God who became a suffering and defeated man? Moreover, the body was conceived as a prison, a limitation to perfection. How could one not consider foolishness even an aberration in taking back the body after the resurrection? Paul, on the contrary, reiterates that the cross is to be wisdom and power of God. Why power? It is power precisely because of the efficacy of the saving plan that flows from the cross. Through the cross is manifested all the love and power of God, who draws all people to himself, now that they have become his children without any merit but by his grace. But the cross is also wisdom, certainly not human but divine, for it is the transparency of God. Through the cross, we now know who God really is, and God is love. In light of this supernatural vision, how should the Corinthians behave? First of all, among them there must be no more contentions or party divisions, but they must all focus on the high mission each has as his son. For Paul says, "We are indeed co-workers, God's. You are God's field, God's building." Each of them must fulfill the task that has been entrusted to him. It will then be God himself who will take care, providentially, of giving value to their actions. I planted, Apollo watered, but God made it grow. Even the communal Eucharistic supper that was supposed to be a moment of strong unity among the faithful highlighted the lack of a sense of belonging to the same community. Participants brought their own food from home, and so it happened that one finished the dinner full and drunk while others were still hungry. Paul's admonition is clear. One must approach the Eucharist in full conviction that it is really the body and blood of Christ, with the purity due for such an important event. Here, as we have seen very succinctly, the first letter to the Corinthians is an interesting snapshot of the early Christian communities. But it is also a concrete exercise in how to deal in a Christian spirit with problems that may arise in our lives, then and now. After a year and a half, Paul left Corinth, and after a short stay in Jerusalem, returned to Antioch.